Emily, a skeptical tycoon, blinded by betrayals, sought perfection. She, a young artist, pure and untouched, seen as unsuitable due to her simplicity. At an event, he's intrigued by the authenticity and purity of her soul and falls in love. But her insecurity explodes. "Alexander, I don't deserve you. I'm naive. I'm so simple. You deserve someone like you." The phrase, spoken with pain, strikes Alexander. He sees the abyss of her insecurity, but also the purity of her heart. In that instant, the millionaire decides he won't lose her and proves their love overcomes everything. Watch this story until the end. You'll be surprised by this story. If you enjoy love stories and romance, subscribe to this channel and leave a comment. We post videos like this every day. Continuing. The sound of the alarm clock echoed through Emily Carter's small apartment at 5 in the morning, as it did every day. At 25, she had grown accustomed to the grueling routine, working as a cleaner in one of Manhattan's most luxurious office buildings during the day, and in her spare time, painting in her tiny makeshift studio on the fire escape of the apartment she shared with 2 roommates in the East Village. Emily looked in the bathroom mirror and tied her brown hair into a simple bun. Her hazel eyes reflected a mixture of exhaustion and determination. Despite the financial hardships that had accompanied her since childhood, in a family of 5 children in rural Pennsylvania, she had never lost hope of one day living off her art. Her paintings, carefully stored in a pile in the corner of her room, were her most precious treasure. Colorful landscapes that captured the beauty she found in the simplest details of life. 20 miles away, in a luxurious penthouse on 5th Avenue, Alexander Vance hung up his cell phone after yet another virtual meeting with Japanese investors. At 38, he had built a tech empire that had placed him among the wealthiest men in the country. His company, Vance Tech, developed artificial intelligence systems that revolutionized entire sectors of the economy. But all this wealth had taken its toll. Alexander walked through the living room of his apartment, observing the panoramic view of the awakening city. His blue eyes, which had once been warm, now held a calculating coldness. 2 romantic betrayals in the past, a fiancée who had left him for a younger rival, and a second woman who had tried to steal trade secrets from his company, had built high walls around his heart. He had learned that people approached him only for the money and the status, never for who he really was. That Thursday morning, a phone call would change everything. Sarah Miller, director of the charitable foundation that Alexander discreetly funded, was panicked on the other end of the line. "Alexander, I need your urgent help," she said, her voice trembling. "The space we secured for the exhibition of underprivileged artists cancelled at the last minute. They claimed structural problems, but I suspect it was pressure from some politician who doesn't want to see underclass art in that upscale neighborhood. We have 20 artists counting on this opportunity. Some traveled from out of state." Alexander sighed, running his hand through his dark hair. "What's the solution you want? I know it's a lot to ask, but could you lend us the lobby of Vance Tech? It's the only space I know that could accommodate the exhibition, and that's available today." Normally, Alexander would refuse. His company was his sanctuary, a controlled environment where only people he trusted had access. But something in Sarah's urgency touched him. Perhaps it was the memory of his own mother, who had been a public school teacher before dying when he was 15. "All right," he said, surprising himself. "But I want everything organized today. I need the space clear tomorrow." Meanwhile, Emily received Sarah's call with a mixture of relief and anxiety. She had invested her last savings in the frame for her best painting, a painting of a child smiling in the middle of a colorful housing project, hoping the exhibition would bring her some recognition, maybe even a sale. "Emily, change of plans," Sarah said. "The exhibition will be at the Vance Tech building. It's an incredible opportunity. The location is wonderful." Emily's heart raced. She knew the company's reputation. Who didn't? But she also knew it was a world completely different from her own. "Are you sure I should be there? I mean, it's such a sophisticated place. Emily, your art deserves to be anywhere. Don't let insecurity sabotage this opportunity. That afternoon, as Emily helped set up the exhibition in the elegant lobby of Vance Tech, her hands trembled slightly as she hung her painting. The environment was intimidating. Marble, glass, and steel everywhere. Executives in suits rushing by, looking at the paintings with polite curiosity. Alexander had decided to come down to check on the event. Not out of real interest, but out of corporate responsibility. He walked among the works, with his hands in his pockets, technically observing the organization, when his eyes landed on a painting that made him stop abruptly. It was Emily's painting, the smiling child in the housing project. But it wasn't just the technique that impressed him. It was the purity of the emotion captured on the canvas, the genuine celebration of life in the midst of adversity. There was a brutal and yet hopeful honesty in that work that he hadn't seen in years in the artistic circles he frequented. "Is it yours?" asked a voice behind him. Alexander turned and found Emily nervously arranging some brushes on a small table nearby. She wore a simple blouse and a skirt that clearly wasn't new, but there was something in her eyes, an authentic light, an honest vulnerability that left him momentarily speechless. "Yes," she replied, looking down. "I know it might not be the type of art that people like you are used to seeing." "People like me?" Alexander raised an eyebrow, genuinely curious. Emily blushed, realizing she had spoken too much. "Sorry, I didn't mean to. It's just that this place is so different from my world." At that moment, a glass of red wine slipped from the hand of one of the guests, spilling directly onto Emily's painting. The red paint ran down the canvas, mixing with the colors she had carefully applied. Emily's stifled cry echoed through the lobby, and immediate tears sprang to her eyes. It was more than a painting. It was her last savings, her hopes, months of work. Without thinking, Alexander took his silk handkerchief from his suit pocket and began to try to gently clean the paint that was still fresh. "Maybe it can be saved," he said softly, his voice completely losing its usual coldness. Emily looked at him through her tears, surprised by the unexpected kindness of this powerful man whom she didn't even know, but who was ruining a certainly expensive handkerchief to try to save her work. "Don't worry about it," Emily said quickly, trying to take the handkerchief from Alexander's hands. "You'll ruin your—" She stopped, realizing the quality of the fabric. "Your very expensive handkerchief." Alexander continued to clean delicately, ignoring the comment. "What's your name?" "Emily Carter," she replied, still in shock at the situation. "And you are—" "Alexander Vance." Emily's eyes widened. She had heard of the owner of the company, but had never seen him in person. Magazine articles always portrayed him as a cold and inaccessible man. But here he was, kneeling on the marble floor of his own company, trying to save the painting of a stranger. "Mr. Vance, you didn't have to do that," she murmured, feeling even more out of place. "I can handle it myself." "The painting isn't completely lost," he said, standing up and analyzing the damage. "The paint mainly hit this area here. With the right materials, a competent restorer could—" "I don't have money for a restorer," Emily interrupted, lowering her voice. Admitting her financial situation in front of him made her blush with shame. Alexander studied her for a moment. There was something about this woman that awakened a curiosity he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just her natural beauty, without excessive makeup or designer clothes. It was the way she looked at him, without interest, without calculation, just with a raw honesty that he had forgotten existed. "I know someone," he said finally. "A restorer who works with the museum where my foundation has a partnership. I can talk to him." "No," Emily replied immediately, shaking her head. "I don't accept charity." The response surprised him. He was used to people accepting any favor he offered, always seeking to get close to his fortune. "It wouldn't be charity. It would be responsibility. The accident happened at my event, in my company." "But you didn't spill the wine," she protested. "Emily," said Sarah, approaching quickly after seeing the commotion. "Mr. Vance, I'm so sorry for the incident. I'm already arranging the cleanup." "Don't worry, Sarah," Alexander replied, without taking his eyes off Emily. "I was just offering a solution to the problem." Emily bit her lower lip, torn. That painting represented months of work in the early mornings after exhausting days of cleaning. It was her most meaningful work, and losing it would be devastating. But accepting Alexander Vance's help made her feel like a gold digger. I need to think," she said finally. "Of course," he agreed, taking a business card from his pocket. "My direct number is there. Contact me when you decide." Emily took the card with trembling hands, avoiding touching his fingers. The simple paper seemed to weigh a ton in her hands. Alexander turned to leave, but stopped. "Can I ask a personal question?" Emily nodded hesitantly. "Why do you paint?" The question caught her off guard. Because I need to," she replied with sincerity. "It's like the colors inside me need to come out, you know? Like I can't breathe right if I don't paint." Alexander felt something stir in his chest, a long-forgotten feeling. "I understand," he said softly, and for the first time in years he really understood. In the following days, Emily couldn't get Alexander out of her head, not just because of the offer of help, but because of the way he had looked at her painting, as if he really understood it. She knew she should call, that it was a unique opportunity, but the fear of getting involved with that world paralyzed her. Alexander, in turn, found himself thinking about Emily with a frequency that bothered him. There was something about her that broke down his carefully constructed defenses. The way she had refused to accept his help, how she had looked at him without any interest in his wealth, was refreshing and disturbing at the same time. On Wednesday, he made an impulsive decision. Something rare for someone who controlled every aspect of his life. He asked Sarah to discreetly investigate Emily. What he discovered left him even more intrigued. She worked as a cleaner in the building next to Vance Tech, had studied art at a public college, but had dropped out because she couldn't afford the tuition. She had no active social media, didn't attend elite parties, had no connections that could benefit her. She was genuine, dangerously genuine. Emily, meanwhile, struggled with her conscience. Two of her co-workers had commented on how lucky she was to have met Alexander Vance, suggesting she should seize the opportunity. The comments made her feel dirty, as if her genuine pain over the damaged painting was seen only as a strategy. On Friday, while cleaning the executive floor of the building next to Vance Tech, she saw Alexander through the window of his office. He was in a meeting, gesturing with authority, clearly in his element. The sight only reinforced the chasm that existed between their worlds. That afternoon, when she got home, she found an elegant letter under her door. Inside, in addition to a handwritten note, there was a professional photograph of her painting, but not as she had left it. The image showed the work completely restored, the colors vibrant again, as if the accident had never happened. The note read, "Emily, I took the liberty of having your painting restored. It's safe and will be returned whenever you wish. It wasn't charity. It was preserving something beautiful that deserves to exist. The world has little authentic beauty." Alexander. Emily sat heavily on the bed, holding the photo with trembling hands. Tears ran down her face, of relief, of gratitude, but also of a deep fear that she couldn't name. Alexander Vance had entered her life like a hurricane, and she knew that nothing would ever be the same. Her roommate Jessica came into the room at that moment. "What's wrong? Did someone die?" "Worse," Emily murmured, still looking at the photo. "I think I've fallen for the wrong man." The following Monday, Emily could no longer postpone the inevitable. With Alexander's card in her sweaty hands, she dialed the number that had been etched in her mind for days. The secretary answered with courteous professionalism, and to her surprise, she was transferred directly to him. "Emily." His voice sounded warmer than she expected. "I was waiting for your call. Mr. Vance, I I need to pick up my painting, she said, trying to keep her voice steady, and pay for the restoration. I don't know how much it costs, but I can pay in installments. We've already talked about this, he interrupted gently, but if you insist on meeting, how about today at 6? I can pick you up from your work. No, the response came out louder than Emily intended. The idea of Alexander Vance showing up at the building where she worked as a cleaner terrified her. I mean, I can come to your company. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Emily, where do you work? She closed her eyes, already knowing she couldn't lie. At the corporate center building. It's next to your company. Which floor? 23rd, she murmured, realizing where this was going. The window of my office overlooks that building, he said slowly. 23rd floor. You work in cleaning? It wasn't a question, and Emily felt her cheeks burn with shame. Yes. Another silence. Then, I'll pick you up at 6. Before she could protest again, he hung up. At 6 o'clock sharp, Emily nervously went down to the building's lobby, still wearing her cleaning uniform, a simple blue blouse and black pants. She had tried to tidy up in the work bathroom, but she didn't have much to work with. When she saw Alexander waiting next to a black BMW, the contrast between them became painfully obvious. He was wearing an impeccable suit, but there was something different about his posture, less rigid, more human. Hi, she said shyly, approaching. Hi, he replied, opening the passenger door for her. You look beautiful. Emily looked at him as if she had misheard. I'm in my work uniform. So what? The simplicity of the answer left her speechless. She got into the car, his masculine perfume and the leather seats creating an atmosphere that made her feel even more out of place. Where are we going? She asked, as Alexander drove through the bustling streets of Manhattan. To a place where we can talk, he said, and where you can see your painting. They stopped in front of a small, elegant gallery in the Upper East Side. Emily frowned. Here? The owner is a friend of the restorer. He agreed to temporarily store some pieces that were being restored. Inside the gallery, after the polite greetings, the owner led them to a private space in the back. There, on a wall illuminated by professional spotlights, was Emily's painting. But it wasn't alone. Next to it, there were 2 other canvases of hers that she didn't immediately recognize. How? She began approaching. I found these in your workspace at the exhibition, Alexander explained. They were kind of hidden behind other paintings. I thought they deserved the same attention. Emily gently touched the frame of her main work, her eyes tearing up. The restoration had been perfect, better than the original. It must have cost a fortune. It doesn't matter. For you, no. For me, everything matters. She turned to face him. Her voice choked. Why are you doing this? You don't know me at all. Alexander was silent for a long moment, observing the paintings. My mother was a teacher, he said finally. An art teacher at a public school in Queens. She used to say that art was the language of the soul, that when someone painted with truth, it was impossible not to recognize it. Was? Emily asked softly. She died when I was 15, cancer. His voice carried an old, carefully guarded pain. My father, he never understood her passion for art. He said it was a waste of time, that it didn't pay the bills. When she died, he donated all her canvases to a thrift store. Emily felt her heart clench. Alexander, I never looked for them, he continued, still looking at the paintings. I spent years focused on proving that my father was wrong about money not buying happiness, that financial success was all that mattered. But when I saw your painting, he turned to her, his blue eyes filled with a vulnerability she didn't expect. It was like hearing my mother's voice again. Emily didn't know what to say. Here was Alexander Vance, the ruthless millionaire, talking about his mother with the same reverence with which she spoke about her own art. You paint like she painted, he said quietly, with your whole soul. How do you know how she painted if you never looked for the paintings? Alexander smiled sadly. Because I remember. I used to watch her paint in the backyard of our old house before we got rich. She had this expression of complete surrender, as if nothing else existed in the world besides the canvas and the colors. Just like the one you had at the exhibition, he added, looking directly at Emily. The air between them became charged with a tension that Emily had never felt before. There was something dangerously intimate about sharing that space, that moment, those memories. Alexander, she said hesitantly, why did you never look for your mother's paintings? He looked away, his jaw tightening. Because when I finally had enough money to buy back everything my father had sold, I discovered that it was too late. The thrift store had closed years before. The pieces were scattered, lost, and you blame yourself for it. It wasn't a question, and he didn't deny it. Maybe that's why I can't let you just disappear, he admitted. I can't save my mother's art, but I can ensure that yours is seen, valued. Emily felt a lump in her throat. I'm not your mother, Alexander, and you don't need to save me to redeem yourself with her. He stared at her intensely. It's not about redemption, Emily. It's about recognizing something true when I see it. The gallery owner appeared discreetly. Excuse me, but I'll need to close in 15 minutes. The interruption broke the intimate moment, but something had changed between them. A door had opened, revealing layers that neither of them expected to explore. In the car, during the drive back, the silence was different, charged with unspoken meanings. Emily, said Alexander when they stopped in front of her building, would you have dinner with me tomorrow? Not out of pity, not out of charity. Because I would like to get to know you better. She looked at him, seeing beyond the wealth, beyond the power. She saw a man who carried his own losses, his own fears. I don't have suitable clothes for the places you must frequent, she admitted. Then you choose the place. The simplicity of the answer completely disarmed her. Alexander Vance, accustomed to the city's most exclusive restaurants, was letting a cleaner choose where they would have dinner. Are you sure? Absolutely. Emily knew she was about to cross a line from which there would be no return. But looking at that man who had kept the pain for his lost mother for over 20 years, who saw her art with the same eyes with which he saw his most precious memories, she couldn't say no. There's a pizza place in Greenwich Village, she began hesitantly. Perfect, he said, smiling for the first time since they met. A genuine smile that completely transformed his face. I'll pick you up at 8. The Vinnie's Pizza wasn't exactly what Alexander expected, but it was exactly where Emily felt at home. Rustic wooden tables, walls decorated with old photos of the neighborhood, and the aroma of fresh dough in the air created a welcoming atmosphere that contrasted completely with the sophisticated environments he frequented. Are you sure you're comfortable here? Emily asked nervously, watching Alexander loosen his tie and roll up the sleeves of his dress shirt. More comfortable than I've been in years, he replied sincerely, looking around with genuine curiosity. It's been a while since I ate in a place where people laugh out loud and really have fun. During dinner, the barriers between them began to crumble. Alexander talked about the pressure of taking over his father's company at 22, about how he had lost friends along the way, people who turned out to be interested only in his fortune. Emily shared her struggles to keep her artistic dream alive while working to survive, about how she sometimes doubted whether she had real talent or whether it was just a romantic illusion. Have you ever regretted it? He asked, cutting a piece of margarita pizza. Not giving up on art to pursue something more practical. Every day, she admitted with a sad smile. But then I paint, and for a few hours everything makes sense again. What about you? Have you ever regretted building all this? Alexander stopped chewing, considering the question. I've never thought of it as a choice. It was always what was expected of me. But what about now, if you could choose? I don't know, he said honestly. "It's been so long since I thought about what I really want that I don't even know if I'm capable of wanting anything just for myself." At 10 o'clock at night, when they left the pizza place, a light rain began to fall. Alexander offered Emily his jacket, who accepted reluctantly. As they walked along the sidewalk towards the car, she stopped in front of a colorful mural painted on the wall of a school. "It's beautiful," commented Alexander, observing the vibrant drawings that portrayed children playing. "I know the artist who made this," said Emily with pride. "Carla. She gives free art classes to children in the community nearby. Have you ever taught classes?" "A few times as a volunteer. It's amazing to see how children aren't afraid to express what they feel. They paint with a freedom that we adults lose along the way." Alexander watched her speak, noting how her eyes lit up when she discussed art. There was a pure passion there, devoid of any artifice or ulterior motive. It was addictive. When they got to the car, neither of them seemed eager for the night to end. Alexander turned on the radio softly, and a soft song began to play. "Can I make you a confession?" he said, turning to face her in the passenger seat. Emily nodded, her heart racing. "I can't stop thinking about you since that exhibition. And it's not just about your art, it's you, the way you look at the world, how you find beauty in places that most people don't even notice." "Alexander, I know we're from different worlds," he continued, his voice low and intense. "I know this is complicated, maybe even impossible, but I can't pretend I don't feel anything." Emily felt her world tilt. There was the most powerful man she had ever known, admitting vulnerability in a way that left her completely disarranged. "You don't really know me," she whispered. "If you knew, then let me know you." At that moment, Alexander's cell phone rang loudly, breaking the intimacy of the moment. He looked at the screen and frowned. "It's from the company. Sorry, I need to take this." He slid his finger on the screen. "Yes?" Emily saw his face change drastically as he listened to the urgent voice on the other end of the line. "What? When?" His voice became tense. "No, don't do anything until I get there. 20 minutes. He hung up and turned to Emily, clearly disturbed. "Emily, I need to go to the company now. There's a serious problem." "Sure," she said, trying to disguise her disappointment. "You can drop me off at home." "No." The answer was immediate. "I mean, if you don't mind going with me, it may take me hours to resolve this, and I don't want to leave you waiting on the street at night." Emily hesitated. Entering his company again, but now under very different circumstances, seemed to cross yet another dangerous line. "Please," he said, and there was something in his voice that made her agree. The Vance Tech building was partially lit even at that hour. And when they reached the executive floor, Emily realized the gravity of the situation. Several employees were present, all with tense expressions. "Mr. Vance," approached Marcus, the IT director, completely ignoring Emily's presence. "We have a leak. Someone gained access to our systems and stole the codes for Project Aurora." Alexander turned pale. "How much?" "Everything, sir. 3 years of development. The hackers left a message. They want 50 million by noon tomorrow, or they'll sell the codes to our competitors." Emily saw Alexander transform before her eyes. The vulnerable man who had eaten pizza with her disappeared, replaced by the ruthless CEO she had heard about in the reports. "Gather the security team. I want all the logs from the last 6 months. Someone from the inside facilitated this." His voice was sharp, authoritative. "And call the FBI." "Sir," Marcus interjected hesitantly, "if we call the police, the press will find out. The impact on the stock—" "I don't care about the stock right now," Alexander retorted coldly. "I care about finding who betrayed me." Emily stood in a corner of the room, watching Alexander command the situation with impressive but also frightening efficiency. It was like seeing 2 different men inhabiting the same body. At 2 in the morning, when the first results of the investigations began to arrive, the truth was even more brutal. The leak had come from someone with executive access, someone close enough to know all the security protocols. The list of suspects is small. said Marcus, handing a report to Alexander. Only 12 people had full access to the systems. Alexander read the names, his expression hardening with each line. Emily saw him stop at a specific name, his shoulders tensing. "No," he murmured more to himself. "Sir?" "Rachel Smith," said Alexander, his voice laden with a pain that Emily didn't fully understand. "She's on the list." Miss Smith was one of the first we investigated, sir. Long after normal hours, Alexander closed his eyes for a moment, as if he were processing a deep, personal betrayal. Emily noticed that his hands trembled slightly. "Who is Rachel Smith?" she asked softly, approaching him. Alexander looked at her as if he had forgotten she was there. For a moment, she saw something in his eyes that frightened her, a raw, primal pain. "My ex-fiancée," he said simply. "The woman who almost destroyed me once, and apparently decided to finish the job." The silence in the room was charged with tension. Emily felt the ground disappear under her feet as she realized that she had just gotten involved with a man whose past was about to explode in their faces, and that her simple and protected life was about to be dragged into a whirlwind of revenge and betrayal that she hadn't even dreamed existed. In the following 3 days, Emily's life turned upside down. Alexander had insisted that she stay in his penthouse for safety. Rachel Smith wasn't acting alone, and the investigations revealed a network of corporate espionage that could extend to anyone close to him. "This is crazy," murmured Emily, looking out the window of the luxurious apartment while Alexander spoke on the phone with his lawyers. "I shouldn't be here." But as much as she protested, she couldn't deny that something had fundamentally changed between them that night at the company. Seeing him lead under pressure, observing his strength and vulnerability coexisting, had broken down her last resistances, and Alexander in turn seemed to find in her the only person he could trust completely. "Emily," he approached after hanging up the phone, the fatigue evident on his face. "I need to tell you about Rachel." She sat on the sofa, preparing to hear a story that she knew would change everything. "I met Rachel 5 years ago. She was a marketing director at a competitor, brilliant, ambitious. When we started dating, she quit her job, said she wanted to dedicate herself to her own projects." Alexander ran his hand through his hair, clearly disturbed. "I was blind. I thought I had found someone who loved me for who I was, not for what I had." "What happened?" "I found out that she was selling information from my company to her former bosses. For 2 years, everything I built, every innovation, every strategy, she was passing it on." His voice carried an old bitterness. "When I confronted her, she laughed, said I was too naive for business, that any smart woman would do the same." Emily felt her heart clench. "How did you find out?" "By chance. An executive from the competition, drunk at a party, made a comment about information that only Rachel could have passed on. It took me months to gather the evidence." Alexander looked directly at Emily. "Since then, I've never completely trusted anyone again. Until now," she said softly, "until you." At that moment, Alexander's cell phone rang. It was Marcus, with devastating news. "Sir, we have a bigger problem," said the tense voice through the speakerphone. "Rachel didn't act alone this time. She has a partner, and they don't just want money." "Explain." "They want you to publicly resign from the presidency of the company and pass control to the board of directors, which coincidentally has 3 members who were appointed by investors linked to her group." Alexander turned livid. "It's a corporate coup." "Sir, there's more. They have personal information about you, photos, documents, and they also have something about Ms. Carter." Emily felt her blood run cold. "What?" Marcus hesitated. "They know about your relationship. They have photos from the last few days, recordings of conversations. They're threatening to make everything public with a specific narrative." "What narrative?" asked Alexander, his voice dangerously low. "That you are being manipulated by a, pardon Ms. Carter, by an opportunist who took advantage of your loneliness. That she set up the meeting at the exhibition. that everything was calculated to get close to you. Emily felt like she had been punched in the stomach. They're going to say that I planned everything. Worse, continued Marcus reluctantly. They have forged documents showing that you received payments from Vance Tech competitors, that you were spying on Mr. Vance from the beginning. That's a lie, exclaimed Emily, standing up abruptly. I know, said Alexander firmly. But the press won't care about the truth. They want the juicy story of the tycoon being deceived by an opportunistic cleaner. The reality of the situation hit Emily like an avalanche. Her simple life, her reputation, everything would be destroyed. And even worse, Alexander would be publicly humiliated, painted as a fool, easily manipulated. How much time do we have? Asked Alexander. 48 hours. If you don't resign by Thursday at 6 p.m., they're going to the press with everything. After Marcus hung up, the silence in the apartment was deafening. Emily walked back and forth, while Alexander remained motionless on the sofa. I'm leaving, she said finally. I'm going to leave town, disappear. That way they have no story to tell. No. Alexander, you don't understand. If you stay with me, you're going to lose everything. Your company, your reputation, and if you leave, I lose you. He stood up, approaching her. Which is the only thing that really matters. Don't be ridiculous. You've known me for a week. And in this week, you've changed my life completely. He held her face in his hands. Emily, for the first time in years, I remember what it's like to feel something real. Do you think I'm going to give that up without a fight? But what about your company? All your work? I can rebuild a company. I can't replace you. That night, while Alexander worked frantically with his legal team to find a way out, Emily received a call on her cell phone. It was an unknown number. Ms. Carter, said a silky female voice. I'm Rachel Smith. I think we need to talk. Emily's blood ran cold. How did you get my number? Darling, I have much more than your number. I have your whole life mapped out. Every overdue bill, every financial difficulty, every shame you've ever been through. The voice was venomous, calculating. But I also have a proposal. I don't want to hear it. You will $50,000 to disappear from Alexander's life, and another $50,000 if you record a video confessing that you approached him out of self-interest. Never. Rachel laughed coldly. Then get ready to see your face on the cover of every magazine in the country as the con artist who seduced the lonely tycoon. I'm going to destroy your life so completely that you'll never be able to work anywhere again. Why are you doing this? Asked Emily, her voice trembling. Because Alexander Vance owes me everything he has. I helped him build this empire, and he discarded me like trash. Now it's my turn to discard what he loves. When Emily hung up, her hands were shaking uncontrollably. She looked at Alexander, who was still working intensely in his office, oblivious to the call she had received. For the first time since she had met him, Emily fully understood the scope of the world she had gotten herself into. And she knew that no matter what she chose, someone she loved would come out destroyed. On Thursday morning, Emily woke up before dawn. Alexander had spent the whole night working with his lawyers, looking for a legal loophole that could save them. She watched him sleeping on the office sofa, exhausted, still in his rumpled suit, and felt her heart break. At 7 in the morning, her decision was made. She dressed silently and left a letter on the coffee table. She couldn't face him and lie, so the cowardice of a written farewell would have to suffice. She called a cab and went straight to the meeting she had scheduled with Rachel. The elegant cafe in Tribeca was almost empty at that hour. Rachel Smith was exactly what Emily imagined. Impeccable blonde, dressed like a successful executive, with cold eyes that assessed Emily from head to toe with disdain. Punctual, said Rachel, sipping a coffee. A good quality in a person like you. What exactly do you want? Asked Emily, ignoring the insult. I've already explained. You disappear, record the video, receive the money. Alexander is free to understand that he needs someone of his level. And if I don't, Rachel smiled coldly and slid a tablet across the table. On the screen, there was a story already ready for publication. Tech tycoon falls for love con. The photos were devastating. Emily entering and leaving his company, dining at the pizza place, walking hand in hand, all accompanied by a cruel narrative that painted her as a calculating opportunist who had planned everything from the beginning. "The story goes live at noon, if you don't agree," said Rachel casually. "And there's more. Documents that prove that you received payments from rival companies. Edited recordings of your conversations that seem to confirm that everything was planned." "This will destroy him too," murmured Emily, reading horrified. "Alexander is strong. He'll recover, maybe even come out as a victim. You, on the other hand," Rachel shrugged. "A cleaner accused of being a gold digger. You'll never get a decent job anywhere again." Emily felt nauseous. "Why do you hate him so much?" "Hate?" Rachel laughed. "I love him. I've always loved him. But Alexander is stubborn, proud. He needs to learn that he can't just discard me and move on. You're just a means to an end. He'll never come back to you after this. Yes, he will. When he's alone again, when he realizes that women like you only want to use him, he'll understand that I was the only one who really knew him." At 9 in the morning, Emily signed the papers and recorded the video that Rachel had demanded. With tears in her eyes and a choked voice, she lied to the camera, saying that she had approached Alexander out of self-interest, that everything had been calculated since the meeting at the exhibition. "Perfect," said Rachel, reviewing the recording. "Very convincing. I almost believe you're genuinely sorry." Emily received the money and a document guaranteeing that the false stories would not be published, as long as she never contacted Alexander again and left New York City for good. At 10 in the morning, Alexander found Emily's letter. "Alexander, when you read this, I will have already left. Don't look for me. Rachel is right about one thing. We are from very different worlds. I always knew this would end badly, but I let myself dream. You deserve someone who can stand by your side without putting everything at risk. I only brought problems into your life. I'm not strong enough for your world. I'm not brave enough to fight against people like her. Please don't hate me. And please be happy." "Emily!" Alexander ran to her apartment, but the neighbors said she had left early with a suitcase. He tried to call, but her cell phone was turned off. Desperate, he activated his entire security team to look for her. At 11:30 a.m., Marcus entered his office with a livid face. "Sir, there's something you need to see," he said, turning on the television. On the screen, the host of a gossip show smiled maliciously. And now, firsthand, an explosive confession from the woman who deceived one of the richest men in the country. Emily's video began to play. Alexander watched in absolute shock as the woman he loved confessed to having lied about everything, admitting that she had planned to seduce him from the first meeting. "I knew he was vulnerable," said Emily in the recording, tears running down her face. "I researched the death of his mother, about how he felt alone. I used all of that to get close. He's a good man, and I used him without scruples." "As you can see," continued the presenter, "another case of a gold digger that shows how the rich are constant targets of opportunists." Alexander turned off the TV, his world completely collapsing. His hands trembled as he processed what he had seen. Every moment with Emily rebuilt in his mind under a new light. The lowered eyes at the first meeting, the reluctance to accept his help, the tears for the damaged painting. Had it all been theater? His cell phone rang incessantly. Journalists, investors, friends. The company's shares plummeted in real time, but nothing hurt more than the feeling of having been completely deceived for the second time in his life. At 2 in the afternoon, Rachel appeared in his office unannounced. "I came to see how you're doing," she said with false concern. "You must be devastated." Alexander stared at her with a mixture of anger and disgust. "You orchestrated all of this. I just revealed the truth. That woman confessed with her own words." Rachel approached, touching his arm lightly. "Alexander, you're brilliant in business, But you've always been naive with women. I tried to protect you, but you wouldn't listen. Get out of my office. Don't be stubborn. We both know we worked well together. I understand your world, your ambitions. I can help you rebuild all of this." Alexander moved away from her touch, the repulsion evident in his face. "I'd rather be alone forever than spend another minute in your presence." Rachel smiled coldly. "We'll see how long that attitude lasts when you're truly alone." That night, Alexander stayed in his empty apartment, looking at the city through the windows. Emily's clothes were still in the closet, her perfume still permeated the pillows. Everything reminded him of the woman who had destroyed his life for the second time. And in a modest boarding house room in rural Pennsylvania, Emily cried, clinging to the money she had received, knowing that she had saved the man she loved at the cost of destroying any chance of happiness she might have had. The sacrifice was made, but the pain was unbearable. Both were completely alone, separated by the lie she had been forced to tell and by the betrayal he believed he had suffered. The love that had blossomed between them seemed to have been just a cruel illusion, and the future stretched ahead like an endless void. 2 weeks had passed since Emily had disappeared from New York City. In the small hotel in Lancaster, PA, where she had stayed with Rachel's money, she lived a daily nightmare. The video had spread across social media, and even far from the capital, people recognized her on the street. Whispers, judgmental looks, and nasty comments followed her wherever she went. But it wasn't the public humiliation that tormented her the most. It was the certainty that Alexander believed every word of the lie she had been forced to tell. On Friday morning, while having coffee alone in the hotel's small restaurant, Emily recognized a familiar voice. "Emily, my God, is that really you?" She looked up and saw Jessica Davis, the artist who had painted the mural in Greenwich Village. Jessica approached with a worried expression. "Jessica, what are you doing here?" asked Emily, trying to disguise the despair in her voice. "My mom lives here. I came to visit her and—" "Emily, what the hell is going on? I saw that horrible video on the internet." "I can't believe that. Please," interrupted Emily, her eyes tearing up. "I can't talk about it." Jessica sat at the table, ignoring the request. "Emily, I've known you for 3 years. You're incapable of hurting a fly, let alone setting up a con against someone. What really happened?" The sincerity in her friend's gaze broke down Emily's defenses. Through tears, she told everything. Rachel's blackmail, the threats, the impossible choice she had been forced to make. "My God," murmured Jessica when Emily finished. "You sacrificed yourself for him. And he'll never know the truth," said Emily bitterly. "Rachel was very clever. She has forged documents, edited recordings. Even if I went back and told the truth, who would believe the word of a cleaner against an executive?" Jessica was thoughtful for a moment. "Do you know Sarah Miller, the director of the foundation that organized that exhibition?" "I know her." "Why?" "She called me yesterday looking for you. She said Alexander is bad, really bad. He doesn't leave the office. He doesn't eat right. He fired half the team because he doesn't trust anyone anymore." Emily felt her heart clench, but she shook her head. "I can't go back, Jessica. If I show up, Rachel will carry out her threats. She'll destroy both me and him. What if we found a way to prove that you're telling the truth?" "How?" Jessica leaned over the table, her eyes shining with determination. "Sarah said something interesting. Apparently, other employees close to Alexander are also being blackmailed. Rachel wasn't acting alone. She has an entire network." Emily frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means that maybe you're not her only victim, and if we can find other people who have been blackmailed—" "Jessica, this is dangerous. Rachel isn't an ordinary person. She has resources, connections. And you have something she doesn't have," retorted Jessica, "the truth." That same day in New York City, Sarah Miller knocked on the door of Alexander's office for the 3rd time that week. He was unrecognizable, unshaven, red-eyed, his rumpled suit suggesting he had slept at the company again. "Alexander, you need to listen to me," said Sarah, entering without waiting for permission. "If you came to talk about Emily, you can save yourself the trouble," he replied coldly, without looking up from the papers. "I came to talk about Rachel Smith." That caught his attention. "What about her?" Sarah sat down, taking a deep breath. "I received a strange call yesterday from a former employee of Hartwell Corp, the company where Rachel worked before she met you. He said she used the same methods there: blackmail, forged documents, edited videos." Alexander finally looked at her. "Continue." "According to him, Rachel ruined the reputation of any executive who refused to cooperate with her. She had a scheme set up, Alexander. People who forged documents, hackers who edited recordings. Why is this former employee saying this now? Because he was one of the victims. He lost everything for refusing to pass on confidential information to her. And when he saw Emily's case in the media," Sarah hesitated. "What?" "He said he recognized the pattern, the forced confession, the public humiliation, the disappearance of the victim. It's exactly how Rachel operated there." Alexander felt something stir in his chest, a mixture of hope and terror. "Are you suggesting that Emily—" "I'm suggesting that maybe you need to investigate more before you accept that confession as absolute truth." That same afternoon, Alexander did something he hadn't done in years. He made a decision based on his heart, not on logic. He hired the best private investigator in New York City and ordered a complete investigation into the last 2 weeks of Emily's life. Meanwhile, in Lancaster, Jessica had convinced Emily to call Sarah. The conversation was emotional and revealing. "Emily, I need you to be strong," said Sarah over the phone. "We found other people who were blackmailed by Rachel. We have evidence that she falsifies documents, but we need your help to prove everything. Sarah, if I go back, she's going to destroy me completely. And if you don't go back, Alexander will destroy himself. He fired 3 employees this week, cancelled 2 important projects. He doesn't think he can trust anyone anymore." Emily closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision. "What do you need from me?" "We want you to tell your version of the facts to our lawyer, officially. And we want you to help us identify inconsistencies in the material that Rachel used against you. What if we can't prove anything? At least we tried. But Emily, I need to tell you something." Sarah's voice became softer. "Alexander never stopped looking for you. Even after the video, even believing that you had lied, he still loves you." That night, Emily made the bravest decision of her life. She would return to New York City, not to hide or run away, but to fight for the truth, even if it meant risking everything again. Jessica accompanied her on the return trip, and when the bus stopped at Port Authority Bus Terminal on Saturday morning, Emily knew she was about to face the most important battle of her life. She didn't know if Alexander would believe her. She didn't know if she could prove her innocence, but she knew she could no longer live with that lie between them. The final confrontation was about to begin, and this time, Emily was determined not to back down. Alexander's office on Monday morning looked like a battlefield. Piles of documents covered the table, evidence that the private investigator had collected about Rachel's activities. Marcus watched nervously as Alexander analyzed each paper with almost manic intensity. "The recordings are definitely edited," said Marcus, pointing to a technical report. "The forensics lab found at least 15 cuts in the audio of Emily's video." Alexander felt a mixture of relief and fury run through his body. "What about the bank documents?" "Forged. The account that supposedly received the payments doesn't even exist at the indicated bank." At that moment, the secretary announced on the intercom, "Mr. Vance, there's a Miss Carter down here asking to see you." Alexander's heart stopped for a second. "Send her up, immediately." 5 minutes later, Emily entered the office, accompanied by Jessica and Sarah. She was thinner, her swollen eyes revealing sleepless nights, but there was a determination in her posture that Alexander had never seen before. "Alexander," she said, her voice trembling but firm, I need to tell you the truth. Emily, Please, let me speak first. She took a deep breath. Everything I said in that video was a lie. Every word. Rachel blackmailed me, threatened me. She said that if I didn't record that confession and disappear, she would publish even worse stories and destroy your reputation too. Alexander stood up slowly, walking towards her. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was afraid, admitted Emily, tears beginning to flow. Afraid of not being strong enough for your world, afraid that you would lose everything because of me. I thought that if I disappeared, you would be safe. Safe? Alexander's voice came out louder than he intended. Emily, you almost destroyed me. Not for disappearing, but for letting me believe that everything between us was a lie. I know, and I'm so sorry, but I needed to protect you, even if it meant that you would hate me forever. Alexander stopped in front of her, his hands trembling with emotion. Do you think I care about money, about the company, about anything compared to you? Before she could answer, the office door opened abruptly. Rachel entered like a hurricane, followed by security guards trying to stop her. How touching, she said sarcastically. The prostitute came back for more money? Enough, Rachel, said Alexander coldly. Enough? She laughed bitterly. Alexander, haven't you learned anything? This woman is a liar, an opportunist. The only liar here is you, interrupted Emily, surprising everyone with the strength in her voice. And I can prove it. Jessica stepped forward, handing a folder to Alexander. We managed to contact 7 other people who have been blackmailed by her in the last 5 years, all following the same pattern: forced videos, forged documents, threats of reputation destruction. Rachel paled. That doesn't prove anything. Yes, it does, said Alexander, quickly leafing through the documents. And more than that. He looked directly at Rachel. We just found out that you never stopped working for Hartwell Corp. You remained their employee throughout our relationship, and you continue to be to this day. That's corporate espionage, he completed. Federal crime. I've already called the police. As if summoned, the sound of sirens began to echo down the avenue. Rachel looked around, realizing she was cornered. You'll regret this, Alexander, she said venomously. When this slut betrays you again... Shut up! Alexander's voice cut through the air like a knife. You don't talk about her anymore. Ever. 2 FBI officers entered the office, and Rachel was led away in handcuffs, shouting threats that no one took seriously anymore. When the office finally emptied, leaving only Alexander and Emily, the silence was deafening. Emily, he said softly, approaching. Forgive me for doubting you. No. She shook her head. Forgive me for not trusting you, for running away instead of fighting. Alexander held her face in his hands, his thumbs drying her tears. We both made mistakes, but we're here now. Alexander, I need to tell you something, she said, her voice trembling. I love you. I've loved you since that first night at the pizza place, when you told me about your mother. And it was because I loved you that I did everything wrong. You didn't do anything wrong, he whispered. You sacrificed yourself for me. No one has ever done that for me before. And you fought for me when I had already given up on myself, she replied, gently touching his face. Alexander leaned in and kissed her, a soft kiss that carried weeks of longing, of pain, of denied love. When they separated, both were crying. Never again, he said, resting his forehead on hers. Never again will we let anyone separate us. Never again, she agreed. 6 months later, the Genuine Heart Art Gallery opened in the heart of New York City. Alexander had financed the project, but Emily was the artistic director, curating exhibitions of unknown artists who, like her, had talent but lacked opportunities. On opening night, as they watched together the crowd admiring the works on display, Alexander took Emily's hand. There's something I need to tell you, he said. Emily looked at him, her heart racing as she saw the nervousness in his eyes. Alexander knelt right there, in the middle of the gallery, pulling a ring from his pocket. Emily Carter, you have completely changed my life. You taught me that true love exists, that it's worth fighting for. Will you marry me? The conversations around them ceased. All eyes turned to them. Emily looked around, seeing smiling faces, people who had learned to respect her for her work and her character. "Yes," she said, her voice choked with emotion. 1,000 times yes. When Alexander slid the ring on her finger and stood up to kiss her, the gallery erupted in applause. But for them, nothing else existed beyond that moment. That love that had survived lies, blackmail, and near separations. 2 years later, in the garden of the house they had built together, Alexander watched Emily painting a sunset while their 6-month-old daughter slept in the stroller next to the easel. The peace on their faces was complete. "What are you thinking about?" asked Emily, noticing his gaze. "That my mother would be proud," he replied, coming closer to kiss her forehead. "She always said she would recognize true love when she saw it, and she was right." Emily smiled, adding another brushstroke of gold to the canvas. "I think she blessed us from day one." "I'm sure she did," agreed Alexander, embracing his family. On the canvas, the sunset that Emily painted was radiant, full of warm colors that seemed to pulse with life itself, exactly like the love they had built together, authentic, resilient, and more beautiful than anything money could buy. Love had won, as it always should win, and they had a whole life ahead of them to prove that happy endings really exist for those who are brave enough to fight for them.